Oh, yeah. So, UVA Darden, and for those of you who don't know Darden is the graduate business school at the University of Virginia. Is it's actually only part of my identity. I've got a lot of titles. About 5 years ago, or more now, probably six, I also accepted a joint appointment at our School of Nursing. And that came about because our Dean of Nursing took a class with me called Leading Mindfully. And she said, Lili, we need this in healthcare. And I said, okay. She worked on me, and now I have this joint appointment with nursing. I'm also the director of the Compassionate Care Initiative there. And the Compassionate Care Initiative exists to support health workers to become more resilient, collaborative, and to find and use their voices. So also, I think you might have heard me say in a previous session, I'm also a yoga teacher. I just do a little moonlighting like that, keeps me honest in the mindfulness world. Okay. Today, you might have been attracted to the question that I posed in the blurb, and it is, why is it that after adversity, some people get stuck, but other people grow? And this has been a question that has been of great interest to researchers. Why is it that some people, after combat, for example, or after a death, or after some kind of grief or loss, develop PTSD or depression, but some people don't? Somehow, some people are able to grow. Well, there are a number of factors, and I don't want to minimize that. There are, of course, pre-existing health conditions. There are just kind of temperamental or personality traits. But the thing I want to zero in on are those things that make a difference in terms of social relationships. And social relationships actually have a strong effect on our ability to get through adversity. You think about community response, for example, in helping to overcome adversity. Well, it turns out that leaders can also have an outside effect on this, and I want to share a little bit about that with you. Today, I want to introduce, by the way, you've done your mindfulness and yoga stretching and everything in other places. Today, I want to say, and then what, right? You have a practice, you do something that helps to center you, that helps you be more resilient. Then what do you do with that? Well, what I'm suggesting is that there are three things that can come out of that from a leadership perspective. One is that a practice like that helps you to be more attuned to not only self, but to others and to situations around you. And just another way of saying that, you develop some spidey sense, right? And the spidey sense can be very informative to the way you do the other two things, which is how you engage with other people, communicate with other people. And I think of this in all the different ways we can communicate, interpersonally, one-to-many, to face-to-face dialogue, etc. But also what you model. Now, I chose these things because think about the way you read your leaders. How is it that you know what's important to them? A lot of people will say, well, the things they say. Sure, the things they say. But we also know of leaders who, for example, say things, but they don't follow up with action, right? So it's also action in what they model. But I'd also put to you, think about how much you take messages from the way that your leaders pay attention, to how well they are attuned to themselves, to other people, and to situations. In that respect, I think about like what's one of the most damning things you can say about a leader, to me, is like they're tone deaf, right? So there's some radar that's broken there for some of our leaders. And that's why I like to suggest that this idea of attunement, which is not necessarily taught, at least not in business schools, is an important skill set. So let's break this down a little bit. Number one, attune to yourself, others, and situations. This is Ken Chenault. He was the CEO of an American Express at the time of 9/11. And one of the things that was very poignant for American Express is that they had a building that was right across the street from the World Trade Center. So his employees witnessed what was happening when the plane struck and when the buildings came down, right? And in that moment, he was actually not in New York, he was away. And he found out what was happening and he had to make a decision. What do we do? Do we just leave people there feeling helpless, like they can't do anything? Or can I give them a role? Can I give them a job? Okay. What he realized is that American Express had an amazing inbred capability, and that is they had a huge call center. And so he put out the message that we're going to be part of the emergency response team here. Okay. So he just defined reality, right? This is a crisis, and we're going to be part of the emergency response. And he said, if we can do that, we might be able to save this city. Okay? So he defined reality, and he gave some hope. He gave purpose to people in a tough moment. Now, I'm going to ask you, what hinders your ability to see what's real and to give hope? What gets in the way of that? Sometimes you might just sit, write a couple words down. What gets in your way of being able to see what's right in front of you and to offer hope to other people? What gets in the way?
Lack of vulnerability.
Thank you. Lack of vulnerability, lack of courage, he says. Ego. Fear. Judgment, preconceived ideas. What else? Burnout. Thank you. Lack of connection. Yeah. So there are a lot of things that can get in the way. Now, let me ask you, and this is a loaded question at a mindful leader conference. What helps you? And you're going to say my mindful practice, right? Pardon me? Focus on passion. Or the love is. Okay, nice. What else helps you? Being present. Access to resources. Nice. Self-compassion. Active listening. Okay. Role models. Nice. So notice some of those things are from inside ourselves. Sometimes those things are from outside of ourselves. What I want to suggest to you is that these things matter. Having some ability to take care of your inner focus is going to make a difference for your outer focus. This is a quote by Robert Frost, sort of. Okay. Robert Frost actually said, no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. No surprise in the writer, no surprise in the reader. Okay. All this to say that how a leader manages themselves affects the message that they can put across. So I've modified that to no focus in the leader, no focus in the follower. So having that sense of focus is extremely important as a skill set for leadership, especially in the context of trauma. I'm going to flip through these slides very quickly because I want to get to a part that's more interactive. And if I do that, then we will have time for that. A couple of quick pieces of research, basic premises. What I have here is our Leading Mindfully model. The basic premise here is that our inner experiences are reflected in our words and actions. And while we would like to believe sometimes in our leadership positions that we can put on a brave face, or we can sometimes control our emotions, in fact, that's not always the case. Too often you risk leaking, right, in such a way that the emotions that you leak undermine your credibility and the message. So this Mobius loop here is meant to represent that managing self and leading others is like a dynamic process in which these things need to be in tune with one another and constantly in sync. Now, you may wonder, well, I'm using this word resilience. What do I mean by that? There was actually a symposium about this in Europe some years ago, And many different kinds of researchers came together, physicists, psychologists, environmentalists, to try to define how do you actually define resilience? Well, they came up with this one: the ability to bend, not break, and bounce back. And sometimes definitions end there. But here they significantly said, and perhaps even grow in the face of adverse life experiences. So the idea is that, no, it's not necessarily doom and gloom if you've experienced trauma. Not easy to grow necessarily, but also not impossible. This is just a quick chart to emphasize the idea that resilience is a process. It requires both effort and recovery over time. And where we give short shrift typically in our culture is on the recovery side, right? We put a lot of effort out. We do a lot of grit and not enough grace, right? And from a personal resilience standpoint and a leadership standpoint, you can begin to build in resilience and recovery into your work. But you still want to have grit. You still want to have passion and purpose, a sense of why are we doing what we're doing? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to get stymied on your pillow, right? Or on your yoga mat. All right. Now, does resilience make a difference for leaders themselves? This research comes from Kermit et al. They operate a executive wellness clinic at Mayo. And what they did in part of the intake there was giving them a battery of tests, and among them was a resilience scale. And here's what they found. Those people who tested lower on resilience had a 4 times higher prevalence of depression and a 3 times higher prevalence of anxiety. Now, in a way that makes some intuitive sense, right? So this is not great news. Also, high resilience was positively associated with well-being and negatively associated with perceived stress. And I know I'm talking to true believers here, but sometimes people actually need to see data like this. This slide makes me so excited. And this was done by some research in the UK. A psychiatrist and his team looked at the effects of exposure to combat among British military. And what they found was, they did all the usual traits and personalities and mental health kinds of assessments. But what they were also looking at is the social dynamics of the unit itself and what made a difference. Here were their findings. Soldiers who rated their leaders higher on resilience screened less often for PTSD and depression. Interesting. So there's something about the leader's example that has a buffering effect for individuals in the group. They compared different kinds of social factors. One was leadership behaviors, and that was the one that mattered most. But it also correlated positively with unit cohesion and perceived organizational support. Okay, so unit cohesion means that kind of esprit de corps, that sense of morale within the group, that was influenced by the leader's resilience. Perceived organizational support was, do I have access to mental health resources? Do I have access to good health care if I need it? Okay, that was also interesting, positively correlated. So it also turns out, and the article is silent on exactly which behaviors these are, but they said that specific leadership behaviors associated with PTG, that's post-traumatic growth, buffered the relationship between combat exposure and PTSD. So I started thinking about that, like, this is such an interesting finding. How could you go the next step and teach people to actually use strategies associated with post-traumatic growth in their leadership? So I did a little research and I came up with this chart, and I know this may be hard to read for some back here, so I'm gonna narrate it for you. Okay, so what we're seeing here, this is number 2 and 3, engaging and modeling for leading for growth. In the first column is ways of seeing that help growth. Now, these buckets, if you will, or these themes come from the post-traumatic growth inventory, which has items on it, maybe 3 to 5 for each of these things. Number 1 is relating to others. Post-traumatic growth occurs when we remember our connection to other human beings, that we're not in this alone. New possibilities, being able to see new possibilities even in the context of disappointment, hurt, grief, and loss. Third is personal strength, realizing that out of this trauma, I actually realize I'm stronger than I thought. Fourth is spiritual strength, right? I now have faith in something that I didn't know I had faith in. And appreciation for life is the last one. So a bit like a gratitude practice, right? So these are the categories, and I thought, well, okay, what do leaders do? Leaders, as communicators, can do 2 things. One is they can notice out loud. So this is where we turn from just perceiving things to speaking them so that other people notice them too. Leaders' communication are like giant pointing devices. So I can notice out loud and lead out loud by saying things like, you know, watching you today with so-and-so, that inspired me. I have just sent a message that says pro-social behavior here is good work. Okay? In the future, I'm going to use myself as an example to envision a new possibility. And to the extent I do that, you can do likewise. Okay? I filled in some other language there as well for some of the other things. And what I'm going to ask you to do in just a moment is to generate your own language for each of these categories. Second thing that leaders do is they lead conversations. And 2 things are important when we're dealing with post-traumatic growth. One is sense making. That means making sense of situations like what the heck just happened here. And remember that idea of defining reality. We have a conversation about how are we each defining reality, but we might also shape it in a certain way that reframes it in more enabling terms. We also can lead conversations about benefit finding, meaning like, yeah, this was really hard, but was there some silver lining here that we could actually grow from? And again, I'm suggesting some questions here, powerful questions, where you're not necessarily supplying the answers, but you are eliciting the answers from the group. Okay, again, this idea of engaging. So when were we at our best today? Yeah, we failed. No question. We failed. But you know, we operated the way we're supposed to. Right? We didn't get the outcome we wanted, but we operated the way we were supposed to. Can we talk about that? Okay. You can invite next time, what would you do differently? Or you can ask somebody, what strength have you discovered in yourself? Or what do you have faith in now that you didn't have faith in before? Or lastly, what do you appreciate about life now? So this is mainly food for your thought. And what I'd like to do is give you time to turn to a person beside you, behind you, in front of you, wherever, and just have a conversation. Invent your own language for any of these categories. And if you need to come over here and take a photo of the slide, it's no problem, just so you can remember the categories. But take a few minutes to do that. I have my yoga bells with me, and I'll ding them when it's time, but go ahead and have a talk. All right. I would love to hear some of your ideas. I want to hear some of your language for how would you approach a post-traumatic growth interaction. What would you do? What would you say to notice out loud? What would you do to help someone make sense or to find benefit in what's just occurred? Yes, please.
I often find myself the language coming up is around superpowers. You know, after in a difficult situation, and you're noticing how people are showing up, and in ways and with skill sets that they might not even have known that they had, and it's just like, whoa, you know, superpower. And that's my unique value added that I can bring.
Nice, nice. Everyone heard that? She was talking about superpowers and helping people identify their superpower. Yeah, good. What else do you have? Yes, please.
Yeah, I would. We were just talking about the situation in Illinois, and I would use language that requested permission and offered up choice.
Hmm. Can you give an example? He's talking about offering permission and choice.
Like in a workplace where it seems they're cautious in language and they're cautious teaching. Permission, offering up choice. Picking up, that's the hard to get away and
I was going to ask that because you're working.
Sure, please.
The other day at work where someone was crying. I don't know her very well, but I had this natural like to hug her, I desperately leaning to her. But I paused because it's, you know, it was work, so I ended up asking permission. Is it okay if I come to you? And that's where we got this great conversation about mental.
Nice, nice. So may I hug you? Is it okay to touch? Yeah. Okay. Good. But then there was a second part in what you said, which was choice, offering choice. Can you give an example of like what kind of choice? Like we could talk about it now, we could talk it later, or what?
a lot of resistances I'm seeing, I'm experiencing. But we don't want to invade into people's viewpoints. We're fearful of conversation we had at the beginning is, well, you know, part of what we're trying to do in being mindful and encouraging mindful leadership.
Yeah.
And you may get some pushback, may not.
Yeah.
But you won't know unless you're trying to be authentic. And if you're not authentic, then either you really benefit from it, and the person you talk to may not have benefited in perceiving and being authentic. Whereas if you do perceive, at least you're authentic. And
Yeah, yeah. I love what you're saying in principle, and I'm just such a super practical person. Like, what are the lines? Feed me my lines. If I wanted to do what you're saying, what would I say?
You're talking about Dave.
Yeah. Okay.
Spiritual.
Hey.
Since these days, the fearless days of stepping into somebody's feelings and attitudes towards faith and spirituality.
Yeah.
And how perhaps it's okay to go past that fear. Say to somebody, listen, no disrespect to your faith, but I'd like to share with you that maybe you could sit for a moment and just speak clear and calm herself and focus on respecting this and try to.
Yeah, good. I see a couple hands going up over here. Yeah.
Here's point. One of the things that I like to incorporate stored as.
Can you speak up, please? Sorry.
Yeah.
I use restored as circles. The indigenous practice of holding circles in space, where you use a talking piece, and so you can pass the piece and don't want to share, and things around how we notice out loud. I would incorporate in a thought, so that I'm just fully present, and I just find it's a really powerful practice to allow people to share what's on their mind. It's hard to speak from the I and just put whatever they need into the circle And I really think the power of that circle, it really shows from just how long it's been around, for thousands of years. So that's one of the tools that I know.
Nice. Yeah. Jean, did you have something?
So, I've had the privilege of sort of bringing and developing some of the second victim programs in healthcare. And for those of you who are not familiar with the subject, it's kind of like the idea is, there's a victim who is your patient, and then I'm a doctor, and let's say I lost a patient, right? And it's, this is your second victim. And the traditional teaching in medicine has always been suck it up, move on to the next patient kind of thing, right? And that's obviously detrimental on many different levels. I think everyone in this audience would appreciate. So having sort of both developed the program, but also having been essentially the peer coach in those kinds of situations, just sometimes being able to just sit there and just say, look, we're not here to solve anything. We're not here to fix anything. I'm here. You're not alone. This is a sanctuary. And we will sit and stay silent, or we will sit and I will listen and not interrupt for as long as you need. And I think that's really important, creating that sense of sanctuary, and that transcends that particular space. I've seen it a lot, honestly, working with COVID. So, when you see hundreds of people on the COVID trail and they've spent however long before they see you sitting in their apartments, houses, some of them in much worse sort of socioeconomic situation than I can imagine. And they come to you, and you're garbed in this PPE from head to toe. You're this weird dude who speaks with an accent, right? How do you sort of create that sense of sanctuary that they can start having a little bit of healing in that environment with a bunch of HEPA filters going at 100 miles an hour?
Yeah.
Can you connect in a way? Can you give them permission to touch your PPE so they have that human contact that they may not have had in months? Right?
Yeah, and to your point about offering choice, we can sit together in silence, or you can share with me what's on your mind and I'll listen. See where I'm getting at with giving them the language. And faith is a touchy one, but it doesn't. Faith, it could be something else. I have more faith in teamwork. I have more faith in the mission of this organization. I have more faith in getting up every day and putting on my shoes and getting out and going after this problem. So there are many different ways that question could be answered. All right. Anybody else? Because we're running a little low on time now, but I just want to make sure we get everybody.
About permission, right? It's permission to yourself, and it's giving space and permission to somebody else.
Nice.
So how powerful that.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I was teaching earlier this week in a program about leading individual and organizational change. And this person, he was a founder of the company and also CEO. And he talked about how by virtue of his title, people come to him and share really powerful stories about where they are in life. And he feels a little ill-equipped to deal with it. And he said, but there's nothing I can really do for them. And I said, oh, no. Just witnessing, just being a person that I can tell my story to is so incredibly powerful. It's like that. I think you said last night at dinner, that shamanic kind of thing, going to tell my shaman, my leader, my story. Very powerful. Yeah.
That is that one more thing.
Sure.
We talked about a little related to new possibilities and hope, which is around mindfulness, which is begin again, which is every moment, every second, every new relationship, we have a moment to begin again. And so just for giving people that sort of hope of like, hey, you know what, that didn't go so great. Hope I'm getting another opportunity. I use the analogy of like a observer going to a table. Each time you go to a new table, you get an opportunity to begin again and create a new experience. Or if the experience is not going well, Elizabeth brought up like, oh, you can, I say, you know what, that didn't go so well. I didn't do this, or we didn't do this experience the way it should have been. We just begin again here.
Yeah, do over.
Just give me a do over.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I'm sorry we have to move on because of the time, but I have one last slide, and maybe we can talk at the break or something. Just to reinforce this idea. So there are 3 ways that you can help post-crisis, post-trauma, to inspire other people's growth. And we've said it many times today, like being a role model, right? Doing your own work first. So attuning to yourself, but then also to situations and others, engaging and modeling with that attunement, right? And keeping it alive throughout the interaction, because it can shift and it can change. So that's what I want to leave you with today. I wonder, do you have any quick questions for me in our last 5 minutes or so? Yes, please.
Say 3 ways your resilience makes a difference. Can that difference be you're helping your team be resilient?
Absolutely.
And that you can help create resilience where it doesn't exist?
That's my point. Yeah. So it's not just, yeah. I mean, it's not that self-referential, like I'm going to make myself feel better. I'm going to be more resilient. That needs to be a means to an end in a leadership role, because that's a social role, right? It's about relationship with other people. And for my taste, interpretations of leadership that are all about making myself great, I'm kind of missing the boat. Like, that's not really what the role is. The role is to interact with other people and to bring them along. Yeah, Quake.
I'm the founder of Social Enterprise.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
A lot of pressure on these own, and it's a very isolated kind of role, because everyone looks up to you if he's that inspirational, charismatic leader. After times of failure, I found that it's harder to keep projecting that energy, and then blame yourself for not being enough.
Yeah.
Not like it's a failure on your part as a person, right? I ran to succumb and knew that identity becomes so conflated in this eyes, right?
Yes.
And so, what advice do you have for leaders, founders who tend to take too much on and need to rebuild themselves?
I know. Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say broaden your repertoire. It means, so if your playbook is all about, I can only show up as a charismatic leader, you're leaving out other ways of showing up. So one way to show up might be to be the person who models learning from a mistake. Right? And that may be actually more important than being charismatic. Okay. So you may need to broaden your skill set. It may be that you've been very successful in this charismatic role and you've relied on this playbook over and over again, but giving yourself permission to branch out and be more of a, whole person. I have troubles with the word authenticity, honestly, because there are times when you can be authentic and be a really dumb thing to do.
Right.
Yeah. I think being honest, I think this is it's vexed for me, I'll say, that authenticity taken to an extreme means I get to say whatever's on my mind and I get to say, exactly what's on my mind and what's in my heart. That is not recognizing necessarily the social role that you play and whether that authenticity is consistent with expectations of you. Vulnerability. So we heard Bill this morning talk about vulnerability. Vulnerability is great if you already have power. If you don't already have power and you're leading with vulnerability, that is very risky. And if you are from a marginalized group or you're a woman, you have to really watch that strategy. So all I'd say is just develop a broader repertoire so that you can use discernment about which card do I want to play in the moment. Does that make sense? So I don't want to negate what you're saying about authenticity.
Like not unchecked vulnerability. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about keeping it real, but in a skillful way. I think
Yeah.
that takes experience. So, I mean,
It does. It does.
You still need to take care of their stuff.
Yes. Yep.
We still have to say time out. Waiting for them. Do that.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. So we are at time. So I just want to leave you with one thought. If you're interested in the kinds of things that we did today, I do teach a program. It's called Leading Mindfully through Darden's Executive Education. We learned from the pandemic that this program actually works better as a 4-week program that meets twice a week, because it enables you to have an experience, try it out at home, come back, talk about it, try it at home, and go back and forth and iterate. And it's more of a project base as opposed to a 3.5-day retreat where you feel really good and then you go home and it's like, oh no, what do I do now? So if you're interested in that, if you want to scan that QR code, we are doing a free seat. So there will be a raffle for a free seat for that program if you like. Okay. Thank you all.